Right. Well, yeah, we can take some notes.
Okay,
Um,
and I can do it. If you want me to do AI, I can.
um,
It
well, I
doesn't
suppose
hurt.
there's no harm. I'm just, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. I
I
think,
can see it's being transcribed.
Okay.
right,
I
okay.
can if you want to send me the transcription, I can also convert it into notes from the text if you wish me to.
Okay. So, is it doing it now? Transcribing?
It looks like it is. I got a notice pop up saying this meeting is being transcribed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
I've now got the minutes up. So I mean the agenda. So um, I think the number one seems to be the um, the question as to whether to go ahead with it as a webinar. And my understanding is that there are financial risks to doing a physical meeting, plus the difficulty of hotel bookings, and
Exactly.
therefore,
So it's not that we're not going to continue to pursue it, but it's very unlikely. And I will keep you posted. My partner in Rome needs an answer by the end of May, but
okay,
I don't want to lead you. I want to give you full disclosure about that, but it's very unlikely because of the money and the risks. However, I would like to ask the question, have you done conferences yourself? And if we did do a conference, would you be interested in working with us on that?
well, yes, I mean we've just had Mystics and Scientists online, and Beyond the Brain is online. So I mean we're quite experienced at doing online conferences.
Mm.
Well, I was talking
Uh,
about in-person conferences. Have you ever done those?
Oh yes, absolutely. Um, and we
all our
do.
meetings were in
We've
person
just,
until the pandemic, basically.
we've just done a weekend retreat with Ravi Ravindra, and our annual meeting is coming up. But these are for 60 to 80 people on the whole, the live meetings.
Yeah. Well, here, and I'll be tell you about the conference situation in Rome. Um, the original venue was the Augustinian Center, which is just off the outside the wall of St. Peter's Square, and its capacity is 400. And we were not getting enough registrants in time to meet the terrible situation with the early down payments from the and non-refundable deposits for the hotel rooms. So that was the
Okay.
problem. The other option was to have it in a center at Palo 6 Hotel, which is right next door to it, and that has a capacity of 100. But to pay for all the speakers, we need more speakers, more registrants to get the money. And so I'm looking for a potential grant of 150, 130,000 euro to make sure that no matter how many registrants we get, it would be successful and we could do it with 100. I share with Bernard the attitude that the conference is the best way to go, but I'm pursuing these other options and I don't hold out much hope. So that's it.
I mean, Robert,
Yeah, like,
just to say, Robert. Well, I mean, when we last spoke, Robert, of course, um, Pope Francis had not passed. It was so, in some sense, with the wisdom of hindsight, though very obviously sad circumstances, it clearly was the right decision because presumably,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So even if we have it in Rome, it still has to be postponed by at least a year because the conclave's taking place now and the Hotel Palo 6. I didn't know this, but it had a contract with the Vatican so that if when the Pope dies, they cancel all reservations.
okay.
You can't deal with that. Now,
yeah,
in
Yeah.
hindsight, we did the right thing, absolutely.
Right.
But also, the conclave is probably going to be done in time for June. I'm going anyway. I think I'll be in the hotel because I want to follow up with my partner, but it's too late. We've got to reschedule it one way or the other.
Robert, are you sure? I mean, do you know how many of the speakers who would have gone to Rome are still prepared to take part when it's not in Rome? even if it's a webinar, for example? I mean, I've obviously said for me it's fine, but I just wondered whether all the other speakers are also positive about that.
I have not broached the other speakers about a webinar. However, I think they are all hooked on this because they see the historic value of it, even though the original draw was being in Rome. It wasn't about Bob or anything. It was about Rome and the Pope, meeting the Pope, which is a problem now. The irony of it is the cardinal who is going to be opening it in prayer, Cardinal Polson, is from Africa and was the runner-up when they voted for Pope Francis. So
Really?
he may end up being the Pope. So who knows? This is in God's hands. I'm just working all the options.
Yeah.
But I think that we'll get them for the webinar. I really do.
So, but the numbers
Well,
are interesting because you're talking about 1,000 if it's online, but maybe 100 if it's physical. Is that right?
At minimum,
the capacity.
I think minimum 100 if it's physical, shooting for 400. But I want to get enough money donated so that 100 will cut it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we're familiar with these kind of financial management issues.
Oh yeah.
If we do it online, the overheads, and with an online event, the overheads are much lower as well because you don't have all the location costs. Plus, you've got the international reach with a Zoom event. You can actually cast the net much wider in terms of attendance. And I was also thinking maybe, I mean, is this meant to be a series? Like, we could start it as an online event with an eye to making it into a physical event the year following. That could be a way to go as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is historic in a sense that we could do that. And the idea was to have a journal issued, especially for the conference, to document it, and then have an ongoing journal. So you saw the last email I sent about the ultimate objective, and that is I'm trying to crack into the hospitals because they are reluctant to mix religion with faith, with treatment, and that's why we're going for neuroscience scans because they're more inclined to see hard science rather than psychological soft science.
Yeah.
How crucial is that?
Yeah, that's a big draw.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a big draw for this. I think the hard science aspect of this, I think, is something which is particularly attractive about it. The fact that it's really grounded in data collection and actual studies and so on.
Hey, actually, yeah. In fact, I'm giving a webinar in a few hours to Contemplative Outreach Limited, which is the organization Keating founded. And I'm going to give a mini of that, of the research, basically.
So the hospital link is very important for this. Is that right, Bob? Is that one of the key points?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is the link, the hospital link, the medical link, is that an important part of this meeting?
Well, it's an important part of the second conference. I'm trying to leverage into the second conference in Houston.
Oh.
Because this is the largest medical center in the world. And I'm retired vice chairman of the Institute for Spirituality and Health in Houston. And that's the first organization that taught chaplains in the United States. It's the oldest. And so I've got connections into these hospitals, and they are a pain to get the doctors to open up to another physical therapy in the terms of physical therapy being expanded to the concept of neuroplasticity.
I suppose that makes the link with the SMN also appropriate because the medical aspect, although of course that's a second conference though. So
yeah, well, I'm thinking that we need to get that to crack those hospitals in Houston. I need a faith base to start it in Rome. And I didn't think of this. This was the Holy Spirit's guidance because that Rome conference was not my idea. Then I realized that if we did that, we could attract the Houston medical profession into looking at the journal, the webinar, possibly if we had one webinar, or a documentary that we're going to produce. And then the next one in Houston, get those guys to be actually at the conference. and then leverage that.
So is there the list of speakers for this year, if I'm not mistaken, that doesn't have any medical people, is that right? It's got a psychologist.
Oh, a number of medical people.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking through the list of participants then again.
Yeah, I guess we got about 3 or 4 MDs.
Oh, you're right. These are all we have.
Although Stuart Hammeroff is an MD, he doesn't really work as an MD.
Hammeroff,
I mean,
Koenig.
Harold Koenig is a big figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And by the way, the first speaker, Lawrence Freeman, he's resident at a monastery in France, and I just visited him yesterday at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. He came all the way to Houston for the cancer surgery. So,
Oh, right.
and that's partly why Houston is the most religiously diverse city in the U.S., which is not very well known, because it brings people from around the world through medicine and oil.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was wondering how Lawrence was and whether he was back at Bonnevaux, and you've just answered that question.
Yeah.
Did the surgery go okay, Bob?
Yes, very, very well. Very well. I had a similar surgery, so I know what he's going through.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
We have strong links with Lawrence anyway, don't we, David?
Oh, yeah.
We do. I mean, he would have spoken at Mystics and Scientists if he wasn't having the operation.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's wonderful. And he was instrumental in putting together a faith science initiative in hospitals in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think if we're going down the topics, I'm certainly happy with 2 and 3. I mean, the network focus is more on mysticism than it is on faith as such. Because in the UK, I mean, we had this discussions last year. In the UK, there's the Science and Religion Forum and Christians in Science, which are much more of the Christian science interface.
Well, yeah, you can see from the religious speakers that they're all contemplatives. So
Yeah.
it's Kabbalah, it's Sufism, and it's mysticism.
Yeah.
And so,
Exactly.
and that's part of this, is to get these different faith beliefs together. And actually, most of those are our board members on Contemplative Network.
Yeah, once you get into the esoteric side of these traditions, there's a lot of overlap on the mystical side of the practices. It becomes, there's a lot of common language, commonalities in terms of direct experience and so on.
Right.
That's
So
right.
even though it's a broad faith and science discussion, it culminates in the mysticism, and the people will recognize that because they'll tie all of the speakers in the beginning on prayer practice and different faiths. They'll tie it to the final neuroscientific research, and they'll realize what this is about.
Yeah.
So, Bob, are you regarding the list of speakers as more or less set in stone at this stage? In other words, is this something David and the SMN are going to have to negotiate over, or are you hoping that David et al. Will just accept the program as it stands?
Well, no, I'm open, but I want to tell you the basis on how I chose them. They're not necessarily the best in the world, okay? But I had met most of them and knew them. And so I knew some of them were the best. Hammerhoff, Koenig, to a certain extent, the lesser knowns like Finley, okay? If you know anything about Thomas Merton, that's powerful in mysticism.
Yeah.
I know James Finley.
I would like to honor their commitments previously made, but I am open to David's and your recommendations. And by the way, Ed, you in this, Bernard, you're the one that should be there too, obviously.
Well, yeah, and I'm participating in this meeting because I was a speaker, and but also I think it would be good for the SMN. So
yeah.
I suppose I'm also partly here in my presidential capacity.
So to answer your question, I'm open to alternatives, but I would like to find out if they're going to be available. And that's part of what might drive it. They may not be available, but I think they will be.
Yeah,
So
I think
I'm open to higher level speakers.
I think the only person who who occurs to me in this context immediately would be Ravi Ravindra, because he straddles exactly this territory. Do you know of his work at all, Ravi Ravindra?
No, I don't think so.
Right. Well, he's one of our honorary members, and we've just done a retreat with him.
Yeah.
I can send you some of his background material. And he's in his 80s. He studied with or knew very well Krishnamurti, and
Spell his name.
Ravindra, Ravindra. And he's emeritus professor at Dalhousie. He has a PhD in physics and an MA in comparative religion, and he had joint chair in physics, comparative religion, and international relations.
Well, here's something I wanted to mention to you. The second conference is when I want to open it up to even more religions. But in Rome, we didn't have time for a plethora of religions. So I thought the Abrahamic would be a nice starting point. And so that was partly what guided the speakers a little bit. And that might, and one of the options is if you have alternate speakers, to be sure that they're present in the next conference, at the very least.
Yes, he's I think what's interesting from a Christian point of view is his book, The Yoga of the Christ, which is a commentary on St. John's Gospel.
Okay.
And so he's neither one thing nor the other. But one of the things he was stressing over the weekend was that you have to remember the grandeur of your own religious tradition, and not, I mean, you might have criticisms of it, and so he was basically looking at the great scriptures, Buddhism, Hinduism, and then the Christian mystical approaches, based on the Gospel of John, and gnosis and inner knowing.
Yeah.
Can I say
very, very profound stuff? It's, to me.
Can I say, Bob, I also know Ravi very well, and although I'm afraid, David, I couldn't attend the weekend, but I'm going to Halifax in a few months, so I'm hoping to see
Okay.
Ravi.
Yeah.
Okay, to answer your question, I'm open to others. I'm not against that. Okay.
I mean, the chances are some of the current speakers will bow out, I suppose, anyway, isn't
That's
it?
a possibility. So I'd like to be able to ask their availability based on the dates that we may discuss today, and tell them that I may be working with another partner, so that I can lay the groundwork for a potential switch if we have to.
But it seems to me quite likely. When you say potential partner, you mean us.
Well, I know you would be a partner. What I'm saying is, I'm working with another partner, and I would work with them on terms of the speakers now too. Okay, so I want to give them an explanation why I may be dumping them.
Well, I see. Yeah. How many days originally would the conference have been, Bob? Because there are a lot of speakers here, so I'm just interested in how long the meeting is.
Well, it's actually 2 full days and 2 half days. And I say that because the opening is on a Tuesday, and whatever date we end up picking, it'll be on a Tuesday to give people to fly over from the US on Monday. And it'll start Tuesday afternoon with Lawrence Freeman and Cardinal Turkson. And I would still try to get him on the webinar, Turkson. And that would be powerful because he's the Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. And by the way, they've not thought about research on mysticism. It's off the radar screen, and they are very excited about it, but they don't trust anything until they've seen it done once. So that would be the first evening. Then the next day would be the morning, physics to creation, afternoon, chemistry to life. That's Wednesday. Thursday would be biology to consciousness in the morning, psychology to mysticism in the afternoon. And then Friday would be the offsites that reinforce those engagements. So offsites are part of the conference, but not part of the presentations.
But this is assuming it's a physical meeting. I mean, if it was a webinar, why could it not just be a long weekend?
Well, if it's a webinar, I'm envisioning that it would be a weekend, a long weekend. Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I was looking into the structure that we used for our Mystics and Scientists conference, and I just sort of mapped on the program as you had, and to see how it would fit into our three-day conferences that we're running at the moment, and it seemed to fit quite well. It seemed to map onto that pretty well. So I think structurally we could make this work in terms of the content you've got right now.
Now,
so that would be a full Friday, a full Saturday, and a full Sunday.
No.
Because when you say 2 days and 2 half days, that could just be 3 days, couldn't it? Presumably?
3 days. 3 days.
Yes.
It's more like 3 days. It's actually more like 3 days. Now, of course, the draw of the conference was the offsites also. And my partner, who was financing this, was the main guy in Rome and Vatican for offsites and all the logistics. And of course, I picked those to reinforce the science message. So mixing art and music with this is unique. So if there were a way to retain the spirit of that in your webinar, that would be powerful, I think.
I was looking into that as well. I think there's such a thing as like virtual tours, where you can actually get someone, you can link up with someone on the site and they take you through a live walkthrough with a Zoom audience using some kind of connection, whether it's just a straight Zoom call to a mobile phone. But those are actually things that we can do. And I was looking into that. So I think that's something we can look at for sure.
Andrew, I've already identified those virtual tours online and I can send them to you. You probably found them already. They're powerful. And then you'd have a speaker walk you through. It'll be a piece of cake.
I'm still a bit confused as to whether we still got the option of a physical meeting as opposed to a webinar and what the preference is, because it wouldn't be as expensive as Rome, you see, if it's an SMN meeting, because...
Well, I'm really liking the idea of a webinar because we'll reach more people and we avoid the financial risks. So I think it's unlikely that I'm going to get somebody to pony up 130,000 euros in the next few weeks. Answer. Now, this is another thought. And by the way, I'll keep you posted. I think it's very unlikely. But I thought we needed this preliminary meeting so we understood what the options are. Okay. One thought I had is, have you ever broadcast a webinar in another city? In other words, broadcast the conference as a webinar.
Yeah, I mean, well, David, you can answer that, but I mean, our webinars are normally accessible from anybody who's paid to attend it, whichever city they're in. So I'm not quite sure what you mean, Bob, by...
I mean, well, the time zone challenges may be a problem, but
yeah,
what I'm thinking of is a webinar that's also an in-person conference. And you're running the conference also as a webinar. You interview the people, it's recorded.
well, that's the live stream option, isn't it?
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
Forgive my
right.
language of non.
We do that too, or we have done that in the past, where you have 100 people in the room and another 100 online.
Yeah, that kind of hybrid setup, that's becoming more and more common. And obviously, yeah, we've done that. You basically bring a cameraman into the location where you're doing the physical event. And we create like an online event through Facebook or YouTube. And then we sell the links to those platforms. And then it's like watching like a live lecture take place. And it can work really well. We've actually been quite successful doing those in the past.
Yeah. Now, by the way, Jeff Renner, who's powerful, you've seen him as the moderator. He's the one that's donating the documentary. And he said to me that one of the problems with a webinar and a Zoom is the quality of the images to capture for the documentary. Now, if we did it as a live stream, the camera would obviously be much higher quality. The sound equipment would be much higher quality. So that's just a factor. I'm not an expert at this stuff.
So is he going to be making an actual documentary of the conference itself?
That's what we're thinking. Yeah, that's what he's willing to do. And also, if it's a webinar, do a documentary off the webinar.
Yes, well, we'd have a recording of the whole event. If we were to do a webinar, then Zoom allows us to record the whole thing anyway, which is what we always do with our online conferences. And then if it was a hybrid event, whether it's in 2026 or 2027, that also allows you to record the live stream portion of that event. So everything which was live streamed to attendees, you get the recording of that. But it sounds like what you're talking about with Jeff is maybe something more comprehensive, like interviews with people on the site and things like that. Is that right?
Well, my understanding of it, yes. And he's talking about a 30-minute documentary, small.
Sounds great.
It's not the whole meeting. It's
not the whole meeting. And part of this is to raise money for our next step of research in neuroscience to convince the hospitals to let us in.
So he definitely wouldn't be doing, in other words, what we do with our normal meetings, recording.
No. This is
not the same thing at all. This is
not the same thing. Yeah, not the same thing. And by the way, we're just discussing all of these different aspects so that we can get our arms around what we should do together. Because I don't know. I'm exploring here.
Presumably, if it's a hybrid meeting, that would mean sort of a certain fraction of the speakers will be here in person, presumably. But would they all be offered the option of coming, or how would you envisage it?
Well, I'm envisioning that if there's really a conference, they would all have to be there, and that's why it's going to be a financial stress. That's why I don't think it's going to work.
Well, I mean, David can comment on this more than me, but we don't always have all our speakers physically present at
Yes, we used to have sometimes we had people participating in Mystic Scientists when it was live. We'd have them participating via Zoom or via internet connection.
This may be the answer to our financial problem. Get the key speakers to show up and the others by webinar. Is that possible?
Yeah. Or the European speakers, for example, and can be present.
Right. The flight costs are a big pain.
You need to look at time zones in relation to the whole program. And because if people are there, then you don't have a time zone problem. You have a jet lag problem, but not a time zone problem.
All right.
Yeah. I thought of that. If it's all webinar on a weekend or 3 days, when do you time it so that people from North America can participate and Europe?
That's what we have to do. You see, we're very aware of that, so that we obviously time our non-European speakers in the afternoon.
Okay.
Or even later on, if they're in Pacific time, then you have to have them after 4 o'clock.
Well, that gets us into the timing of this. So if I recall, you started at about 3 or 4 Houston time, Europe time. That's what you're saying.
Well, it depends on how we structure it. So last year we had 2 American speakers starting about that time on the Friday, and then any other American speakers were later in the day on those other days. But that could interfere with your kind of neat progression.
Yeah.
Because it would mean that that if you're wanting to go from astronomy to physics to biology to psychology, then that has to work with the time zones as well.
Yeah, that's a challenge, boy. Yeah, interesting. Well, I didn't show it to you, but I had a guidelines for speakers, and Jeff Renner interviewed them all with me and with Jan Masterson. She's the one putting together the program writing, and he was the one that was going to introduce them. And it's an odd approach to a conference. I've never seen it done before, but the idea was to try to get a question, introduce a speaker with a question, and have that speaker give their own spiel. But in the end, answer that question. And then a new question that's a logical progression to the next speaker, so that there's a continuity, which you never see in conferences. And I did that in my book, but I don't want to force them to say what I wrote in my book. But I can show you the guidelines and mail those to you so you saw how I was doing it. And so we've got flexibility.
Is that what I took part in, Bob? There was a session where you spoke to me and some of the other speakers, and we were sort of interviewed. Is that what you're referring to?
That's it. And those were all recorded.
Yeah. Okay.
And so make them available to David and Bob.
I have to say, one thing that very much impressed me, Bob, was the huge number of conference promoters you've got. I don't think that was, but I mean, you've got this huge number of promoters. I mean, which is even bigger than the SMN ever has. I mean, you've got 113 promoters.
And I called most of them and talked to most of them. It was a massive effort, and I knew a lot of them. The problem, though, was we still didn't get a lot of registrants in a timely fashion.
Yeah, but that's because you gave them very short notice. Because I remember getting an email which said basically people had to book a hotel within a few weeks, and I knew that was going to be a problem.
Yeah, and so that's my inexperience at running conferences. I don't know what I'm doing. So, but now we've got the contacts made, and you can tell from those how many put it on their websites and their newsletters, how many were alerted to it. So it's huge. There's no question. I would do that again for this, whatever we put together.
I mean, David,
yeah, because in terms of projections for numbers, that's an amazing partner list. And did all of them respond enthusiastically? Because that's an incredible response you've got if they all participated.
No, they didn't all participate. You could see the footnotes on I was logging who I contacted, who responded, etc. But I would say, at least 30% of them actually advertised it on their websites and all that, and their newsletters. There were others, a lot of them I got through the speakers because they had their own networks. What I did not do properly was advertise more in the public forum. So, for example, the Worldwide Church there's the Worldwide Church Organization and things like that. Didn't do that. And so that may have been a mistake. So I'm open to learning about running conferences. You got more experience in this than I do. Whatever.
Well, I think David and Andrew, you've got a very extensive list, but it's not as extensive as this, is it?
Nothing like.
Yeah, I mean, we've got someone who's who's very interested in doing this kind of partnership work. Who could actually begin to reach out to that list as part of the project. So that could certainly be something that we revisit in terms of re-energizing the list and seeing who has an appetite for an online conference if that was the way we were to go. And I think that in terms of our own audience, we can pretty reliably, with a good lead time, and obviously we're going to have a nice long lead time for this, we can pretty reliably be sure of about 150 to 200 plus attendees for a 3-day conference. We've been averaging in that region for our own conferences. And I think this one has potential to certainly have the same attraction for our own particular lists.
Yeah. Well, now that you brought that up, how much lead time do you need?
Well, if we're looking at summer 2026, I mean, we normally operate with a sort of a 3 to 4 month lead time or less. So I think we've got lots and lots of time. And I'd actually be quite interested to see what we could do with a much longer lead time in terms of previewing the conference, giving people, taking like an agile approach to some of this and giving people lots of time to think, to prepare, sort of seeding it. If the projections that you were starting with, which was in the region of sort of 800 to 1,000 potential attendees, I think we could really work with that in terms of seeing how far we could go with attracting those kind of numbers. I'd be very curious to see what we could do with that.
presumably it has to be somewhere in between in terms of the time. Mystics and scientists and beyond the brain. Is that right,
Yeah,
Dave?
it would need, from our point of view, 2 points really. Seem to be interference coming from
I
somewhere.
think Andrew, mute, please.
It's probably some bus announcement.
Andrew,
It would need to be between Mystics and Scientists and our annual meeting, which would mean it would need to be in May. That would be my immediate thing, and then also we would need to hire a dedicated conference administrator. We couldn't take it on with our current capacity. We just don't have enough capacity, and so that would all need to be factored in. I mean, we can have someone working with our conference events manager, but it would there with 700 or 800 registrations, it would overwhelm the system.
Do any of our people work part-time, David, in the sense they will be happy to do something extra for more money? I just can't
Well,
remember.
it's possible. I mean, we're looking for an extra administrator 3 days a week. We just started advertising for that, so it's possible that person could take on. We don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the point I'm making is that we would need to take on extra capacity in order to manage the administration.
And that would have to be covered in the cost of the.
Yeah,
certainly.
now, are you talking about May 2026? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, we used to have. I mean, that's actually the way we used to run some of our conferences. Is we'd have a dedicated conference administrator, whose work it was to pull all that together. And so I don't think that's too difficult to find. But obviously, we'd need to be satisfied in advance that this was a competent person who we could rely on.
Right. Is this enough lead time for you? May 2026?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that could be during the spring break of the academic community in the U.S.
May? No, that's too late for spring break.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 700 to 1,000 is a whole different scale of operation for us. But I think that, as David says, with someone who's focused and dedicated just to working on that project, because often what we have with our capacity limits right now is that we've got an excellent administrator in terms of our events manager, but they're working on multiple projects and there's a lot going on. So I think the advantage of bringing in someone who is focused on this would be that they could give all their attention to it. And I think that would make the difference in terms of managing that extra scale.
We might be able to recommend somebody if you tell us what you think their scope would be.
Yeah.
but by the way, it wouldn't be spring break, if I understand it, because that's when the Mystics and Scientists meeting is in Norman, isn't it, David? I mean, that's April.
No, that will be earlier. I mean, there'll be April. No, it wouldn't be in the spring break, as it were.
I was thinking April was spring. Sorry. So what is the?
Yeah. No, I'm thinking, well, it needs to be in May from our point of view, because we'd have Mystics and Scientists the month before.
Okay, but that's not the spring break. That's my point. It's May is.
Oh, well, it could be the half-term break.
Okay. You're thinking.
You're right. I think the spring break in the U.S. is February, March, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is is there such a thing as a midterm break in the US? I can't remember.
No, I don't think so.
But anyway, I mean, that May seems to be the obvious time, doesn't it?
Okay. That's the end of and usually end of May, the end of the classes and all. So whatever.
But yeah.
Now, could you give me an idea of what you would want in that person to do? Because we're all volunteer. We might be able to help, but if you have a dedicated person, we might be able to recommend somebody. What do you want that person to do?
It would be someone who is like very efficient and competent in terms of like digital media platforms. So in terms of like coordination, there'll be a lot of coordination and communication between the speakers and the attendees. And it depends on how much of an isolated project we want to make this, whether we want them to be maintaining websites, bookings, and social media. I think we'd need to talk to the team and see how much capacity for someone like Sonia would have, for example, in terms of taking on the marketing. And whether I think Jenna would be an obvious choice in terms of the partnership work if she's got capacity. And then it's a case of like that person would just need to be able to coordinate and manage a lot of like the communications back and forth. I think the stresses of that kind of arrangement is really just being willing to go back and forth with lots of communication and coordination involved.
Absolutely.
But if it's going to be online, it would need to be someone who is very comfortable and familiar with the digital realm of suite of platforms in terms of all the communication technologies, digital media, digital marketing. It would help if they were able and competent to understand how all of that was working.
Do they have to be located anywhere in the world? Any particular?
Well, it could be done from anywhere. Yes.
Okay.
But you mentioned Jenna, Andrew, but Jenna's already working for the SMN. So I thought you were saying it needs to be someone outside the current staff.
Oh, yes. I mean, when I mentioned Jenna, I was thinking just in terms of she wouldn't be that person. She would be helping to facilitate and augment the work. So she might focus just on partnership work. So this person, the conference administrator, would be the coordinator. And then Jenna might take on partnership work as part of this project. Sonia might take on marketing work as part of this project. But the conference administrator would be the one who was coordinating it and probably overseeing the work and the project. It would need to be costed out and thought of as a standalone project. And then we would, make a proposal to Jenna and Sonia in terms of a standalone proposal for the for the work they do. So the costing, the time commitment, it would be seen as like a completely separate line in their invoicing.
Yeah.
You mentioned website. I was thinking that we could leverage off of the existing website, and I get the domain for that because my partner in Rome was handling that, and it's a Europe website, and then take it over, and then you just modify that to suit.
That sounds really promising. Is it the website that you shared with us in terms of the live event?
Yes, it's bear with me.
There's a lot of background noise, isn't there? Do we know who that is?
Yeah, it's Andrew, I think.
Ah, okay. By the way, while you're looking for that, as regards the title of the meeting, David, I mean, obviously, science enhanced by art, music, and etc. I mean, and interfaith mysticism. It's quite a long title for the SMN. I mean, is that something which is that the title you would like from the SMN perspective? I mean, obviously that's the theme, but I'm just thinking in terms of an actual title. That's
basically faith and science, and then I mean, this is fine, and we can think about people for online musical interludes as well.
Yeah. Faith, I mean, obviously this is between you and Bob, but so basically faith and science would be, it seems to me you want the overall title to be something short and snappy, like Beyond the Brain. So it would be
faith and science is short and snappy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the rest of it, enhanced by art, music, and interfaith, would be like a subtitle then.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you put the subtitle in as the subtitle, a mystical journey into God's love, or whatever that was.
Well, as long as you're interested in leveraging off of that because it has marketing value at this point. I think that's the important thing, you know.
I think what David just said, a mystical journey of art, music, and
Yeah,
etc. That, I mean, that has more appeal than enhanced by art, music, and interfaith mysticism.
yeah. I'm open to changing the titles as we go in two ways. One, keep it similar so that we can leverage off of the marketing we did so far, and then change it to improve the marketing that from your experience, you know.
Could it even be interfaith and science webinar, for example?
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah, it's interfaith.
Well, I meant interfaith and science webinar somehow. What do you think, David? So, interfaith and science sounds a little bit better, doesn't it? I mean, maybe this is a level of detail we don't need to think about at this point, but
I'm not sure interfaith and science. Not sure that really
right,
works
yeah.
because
sounds,
it's not something that's normally spoken about.
yeah, because it's ambiguous as whether the inter is between the face or between the faith and the science, I guess.
Well, I mean, the other thing you could do is put science and interfaith mysticism.
Now that's interesting because, yeah, then you don't have that ambiguity. Science and interfaith mysticism. What do you think about that, Bob?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's nice, but it sounds more like a subtitle. It's almost like a tagline or something. Like, are you thinking you call it the Science and Interfaith Mysticism Conference?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I was thinking of the overall title. Faith and science seem to be good. I was just wondering, David was suggesting that science and interfaith. I mean, maybe it sounds too complicated to put the inter in.
Yeah. Well, the interfaith aspect of this was mainly in the faith traditions, the Abrahamic faith traditions represented in mysticism, and the ultimate last part of the conference talking about neuroscience and mysticism. Where you look at the speakers, they're not all talking about neuroscience.
So actually, when we talk about interfaith, it's still within the monistic traditions, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, interfaith mysticism. That's where the word is.
But I mean, it's interfaith, but you're not talking so much about the Eastern religions. You're talking about the three.
Well, we're talking about how it's applicable to all religions, basically, but those represented at the conference are only the Abrahamic. And the last speaker is this Podolsky, and she was going to lay the groundwork for the next conference where it's opened up to all religions. More other religions will get involved, put it that way.
So I think really I will withdraw my enthusiasm for interfaith because, I mean, this is really focusing on the Abrahamic religions, and interfaith to me has a more general connotation, perhaps.
Well, you could say science, faith, and mysticism.
Yes,
That
yes.
would be another way of.
In fact, you need to know that one of our board members is an artist, and he did this in a bas-relief actual piece of artwork. Faith, mysticism, and science at the bottom, if you can read it.
Okay, there we are.
And so this is actually a piece of artwork that's solid that would greet the people. It's already shipped to Rome.
Yeah, that's good.
That's very nice, that symbol, yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. I think it captures it.
And so the three flames are faith, mysticism, and science. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, that's right. And mysticism, the middle one with the blue, basically. So there's symbolism in it.
That's nice, but I'm rather obsessed with the three worlds of matter, mind, and spirit, and there's a sort of link there if you think of faith as being, I suppose, mind.
I see mysticism bridging the two. That's what I see.
Interesting, yeah. So then I suppose in some sense I like the idea of bringing some of the subtitle into the main title. So I quite like what David said about the science, faith, and mysticism.
Yeah.
And enhanced by the music and art sort of thing.
Yeah. And what David said is what we kind of did here, exactly.
Because I quite like the idea that the mysticism gets promoted from being part of the subtitle to being part of the main title,
Yeah.
leaving art and music as the subtitle.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you, David? I mean,
Yeah. And then the rest of it, the art and music, that can come into a description.
yeah, absolutely. So my
Yeah,
general,
that's looking and sounding really good. It's a
yeah.
beautiful, it's a really nice logo.
I mean, I'm really pleased. I have to say, I feel my prime role has actually been rather to sell this to the SMN. So I've been, because I was involved in the original plan, of course. But I'm delighted that my impression is that David and Andrew are both very positive about this. So it hasn't required much selling.
And we have the next few weeks to kind of solidify our final program, whatever it is, whether it's live stream or webinar or whatever. But I think we need to give enough thought to this that we're ready to pull the trigger when we decide.
And can I just clarify, is this does the two organizations have sort of joint billing in this? Is that right? I mean, so is it what's it? A UTF, is that the word? A UTF SMN joint webinar? Would that be the title? Or is it just, I'm just trying to work out the relative roles of the two organizations.
Okay. If you look at, let me explain the roles of my partner in Rome now, okay?
Yeah, that's what
He's handling all of the webmaster in Italy and meeting Italian law because he's handling all the offsites. He's doing all the logistics of buses and hotels, and I'm doing and on our side, Contemplative Network, got all the speakers, all of the thinking in terms of how the progression of the talks would be, the subject matter, and the ultimate focus on the last end with culminating in mysticism. Now, shifting that, we are all volunteer. He had actually payroll people working, which is the issue. And so now I see a little bit of a shift of the scope. If it were strictly webinar, I see the website being taken over by SMN and the split of work that I put in these topics a little different in the sense that I could still contact the speakers and talk them into being on the webinar because I know most of them. I've gotten to know them. Open to ideas from David on other speakers. And so this role of this outside third party, to a certain extent, I've done a lot of that myself in contacting the speakers. And I could follow up with that pretty easily. I prefer somebody else to do it, but whatever. But I know them, okay? So.
I mean, I'm sort of really asking whether, I mean, David normally, when it's an SMN meeting, David's the boss. He's the over. I mean, lots of people are involved, and obviously Andrew's involved, and all sorts of people. But David is normally overseeing it. So I'm really just asking, in this meeting, is it you or David or some collaboration who's going to be in charge, if you like?
I'll let David answer that. Is he still here?
He's disappeared. But I mean, I presume Andrew David would want to be in charge. Is that right?
Well, I think David's very collaborative as well. I think the fact that Robert has already done a lot of the initial work in terms of putting together a speakers list, I think that's one of the things which I think might make this a little bit easier to put together. Is that you've got like an potential event already set up in terms of all of the. If I'm right, all of these speakers are already aware of this and have expressed interest and commitment to doing this. So I think David will certainly have some ideas about who we can add to the lists, and in terms of if there are gaps, open up. But it sounds like what you were describing, Robert, in terms of the agenda items for today's meeting, I think you were seeing it as very much a sort of a 50-50 collaboration. Is that right?
Well, I kind of think that's the way it will work out. The webinar has appealed to us because we need extra income from our organization. And I think that might produce more. But you're absolutely right. I did a lot of the work that you would have this third person do. Anyway, the question is, that's what led me to believe that when we get done with this conversation, the cleanest way would be 50-50. Now, as far as who's running the thing, the way we did in partnership in Rome, we each had our scope, and we said it was a co-founding partners, whatever. So I don't know how you want to do that. I'm not interested in being the head honcho. I just want this thing to work.
How will your contact, though, the person who was originally doing a lot of the work, how will he react? Would he be upset if he was sort of pushed out, or?
Well, if it's a pure webinar, that would be the end of it, because he's already said that unless I can come up with money by the end of May, he can't go on.
Oh, this is the guy who was providing the money originally, not just.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the money, the offsites, the website, all that.
Because I don't know if is it confidential information. I don't know, but this guy has already generously. He gave like $50,000 or something for the Rome meeting. If that's
yeah, he's in. I don't publicize this in these words, but I'll tell you that he spent 50,000 euro already out of pocket, and so his board is getting cold feet moving forward because we didn't have a lot of registrants, and they're willing to continue and do it again. However, they want their original costs covered so that they can start over again. And so they're willing to do that, but they need a decision by the end of May. So unless I can come up with 50,000 euro by then, he's out of it. However, I'm convinced that we didn't do things right. For example, I didn't advertise soon enough because I was fighting getting the speakers, and I was doing it all myself. I think we needed to separate the registration cost of the presentations and the offsites so that it didn't look so expensive. If people wanted just the presentations, they could do that. So we didn't package it properly. So I have other ideas on how to do that. Yeah. But that's why I'm going, actually, when I contact potential donors, I'm going for 130,000 euro. Because if we're going to do this, I want to slam dunk it. I want to be able to say, we get that money, it'll happen.
But what I mean is, if it's a webinar as opposed to a physical conference,
he's out of it.
You don't need any extra money. I mean, it's all.
That's right.
And we don't need that money, and he's out of it. He's out of it.
But
then does he still want to recover his costs?
No. He's willing to walk away and make it a loss if he can't come up with the money.
Wouldn't it be politic in that case for his organization / name to be part of the conference?
Well, I don't think so, because his nonprofit's focus is art and music, and every time I try to pull it away from that, and also the Vatican experience, and their nonprofit actually is the main funder for refurbishment of St. Peter's.
Wow!
So it's a very fast
money, in other words.
And we got a little bit of money from Strake Foundation in Houston. Guess who Strake is? Strake is the guy, he's dead now, but the Strake Foundation was established by George Strake. He was the one that quietly funded the search for and the discovery of St. Peter's tomb in the bottom of St. Peter's. So somehow my network is kind of overlapped. But to answer your question, unless I can come up with the money, my partner in Rome is ready to walk away, in which case he's not involved. Now, if it's a live stream, obviously there would be some involvement, but that's a different story.
Yeah, it probably will be a live stream, won't it? That seems to be.
Well, I think we've probably done as much as we can in principle today. So we should fix another meeting to drill down on a few other items.
Okay.
I would say. In terms of the decisions that we've reached or approaching, some sort of conclusions, are we feeling pretty sure that we're going to go for an online event for this one?
Now, when you say online, you mean with a live conference at the same time?
You mean
No,
a
no, I
hybrid?
mean like a 3-day webinar, like what we've been discussing.
Just out of
As opposed
curiosity,
to
when
being
you
hybrid, you mean, Andrew? As
Sorry?
opposed to having some physical participants.
We could do a hybrid. A hybrid event means you've got a physical location which you're live streaming to a virtual audience. If we were to do that, we'd need to then start scouting for locations. We'd be back into a physical event.
Yeah.
It'd be a physical conference with a live stream virtual aspect to it. So that's a different kettle of fish, because then the question would be, are we in Rome? Are we in London? That'd be a different conversation, as opposed to a webinar like what Robert's, one of the options I think Robert's suggesting is that we do a 3-day online conference, like a 3-day webinar, which is what we've just done with Mystics and Scientists conference.
If we do a live stream in Rome, we already have the location. We know that. We got it. That's not the problem. The problem is the logistics of a live conference going from Tuesday through Friday and having that live stream.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, then you're back to all the budget issues and the hotel
That's
Yeah, well,
That's
and the
right.
speakers and the. So I mean, it's a quite different kettle of fish, as someone just said.
yeah, exactly.
If it's a live, and if it's basically live, then the live stream would just be an addition and an additional kind of income.
Now, what we could
Then you
do,
still have to come up with a lot of money in order for it to be live, even next year.
yeah, if we did do it live, we could move the conference to a weekend. That's possible. Do it Friday through Monday. We could do that, but we're still back into the money issue. I'm gonna have to have money, and then I got to get that money together, basically.
And actually, I guess it's true to say, isn't it, David and Andrew, we no longer have big physical meetings. I mean, there's the annual gathering and things, which is a physical meeting, but the Mystics and Scientists Beyond the Brain, they are now always webinars. Is that correct? I don't know if that's indefinite.
Yeah.
No, that's true. The last really big physical meeting we had would have been Beyond the Brain 2019, I think, David. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right.
Which was, but that was 200 people in a university lecture theatre. So if we're looking at like double, triple that size of attendees. So in terms of our history of organisation, that would be that's a scale which we haven't managed so far in terms of a physical event. It would be quite a big consideration for us to take that on. But it doesn't mean we couldn't do it, but we'd need to really approach it with that with a lot of care and planning to do that.
The figure of 600, I mean, Bob said 1,000, but that's if it's a webinar. I don't think Bob was anticipating 1,000 people if it was a physical meeting.
No.
That's right.
Physical, I'm looking at hopefully minimum 100, max 400. But webinar, I think we could hit 1,000 if we advertise it properly.
Well,
So I think that's pretty exciting.
We're at a kind of decision point, Bob. I think if you happen to come up with the money by the end of May, then that's one route. If you don't, then I think we're back to the webinar route.
Absolutely, that's the answer.
Yeah. And so, if you did get some sponsorship, then obviously there could be a live stream element. And obviously you wouldn't have the site part of it. So I think we should meet again once that's clear. And then if we're going to go forward with the webinar option, then we can look at that in more detail.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think, Bob, you'll need to check how many of the speakers are going to be happy for a webinar, because in some sense, it's not in Rome, which was one of the attractions meeting. Mm-hmm. And also, it's now not a physical meeting either. So it is possible that the number of dropouts will be bigger than you're anticipating. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe people prefer Zoom meetings. But
the good thing with Zoom is the convenience. So that people won't get the added benefit of actually being in the location, but it's also easier for them to attend from their own home. So I think that balances out the loss of the attraction with being in Rome. Is balanced out by the ease of attendance if it is an online Zoom event.
And also, Bob, I've had an idea. Maybe you could get the next Pope, especially if he's your friend, to take part in the Zoom. He could make a Zoom papal broadcast.
Well, and a blessing.
In June, I have invited him, Turkson, to a dinner or a lunch while I'm in Rome.
Yeah.
I have not heard back from him, and he's got a wonderful sense of humor. I have to tell you. I'll tell you a quick story if you have a moment about him.
Oh,
We met, Lyndon and I met with him and the president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Powerful organization, as you know, very historic. And this guy who looked like he was dressed like an archbishop kept serving us water, and he was in and out. And finally, I asked the president of the organization, "What's his name?" And he says, "That's Cardinal Turkson. He's the chancellor of the organization." So I got to know him, and I called him on his mobile phone, and I said, "I was so impressed with your example of the servant leader, the perfect example of the servant leader." And he said, "Well, thank you. I was, serving us water." He says, "Well, thank you. But next time you come in town, would you bring some Texas whiskey, please?"
Very good.
Yeah.
So he's a very down-to-earth person. And if I can get him to stay on the webinar, I think that will enhance the speaker participation. So my feeling is that I don't want to go to the speakers too prematurely and give them the chance to say no.
yes. Yeah.
And so my intent is to go to them, but I'd like to have our next meeting first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no,
That's a good idea.
Am I correct, Bob, that this person you're talking about, he is one of the potential candidates for the papacy?
Well, as you know, it's supposed to be a secret vote, which is all not true. I mean, it leaks out. So the last time Pope Francis was elected, he was one of the runner-ups.
Goodness, yeah.
And so they're looking at an African, potentially African. But what I have found is no matter what the press predicts, it's never right. I mean, it ultimately is a surprise. So you don't know.
No, it's the same with political elections.
Yeah,
exactly. True enough.
And added to the risk of a live conference is the tariff wars going on internationally now. And so people are reluctant to spend money and travel. And so I can't assess that risk. I don't know how to assess it. That's why I have to have a lot of flexibility on our final decision. And I would do that jointly with you all to work this out. And so I'm going to try to talk to my partner in Rome to let them know where we're at before our next Zoom. And so I'll have more information to be able to share with you.
Great.
Well,
so how soon can we meet again? How soon can we
very
meet?
useful meeting anyway.
We there's no point in meeting before the watershed, as it were, unless you decided not to go ahead with the physical element. So we could meet at the beginning of June.
I would be willing to do that if you were committed in principle here to do a webinar, if it's a webinar only, and to look at a possible live on stream if we do have a conference. See what I'm saying? I need some sort of because
I think
that's going to leverage me as to what we're going to talk about.
Andrew, I think we can agree in principle, and Bernard, subject to the detail, working out the detail. But I think we see this as a very good strategic opportunity for partnership with you and for extending the reach of the network. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I think certainly in terms of an online webinar, a 3-day webinar conference, I think that's that we can find a way to make that work.
And also, that's why I was glad to be here, because in some sense, if it makes any difference, as president, I'm very much in favor of this collaboration. And so, that's why I'm taking part in this meeting, really. I'm trying to sort of make sure it goes ahead. So I'm really pleased that David and Andrew's positive response.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
Before June,
Yeah,
I would like to at least agree on potential dates or a date, try to resolve some weekend dates, either in May or whatever you're proposing, or June, whatever it is, and then maybe address some of the issues. Let me think about some of the things that I would like to have discussed and kind of confirmed before June, so that I can know what I'm going to deal with my partner in Rome. And I might have to think about that and follow this up with an email.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I would suggest the last weekend of May.
That might work. That might work.
So that's around
That actually might work for a live stream, actually, if we end up doing a conference. What about June instead of May? Your opinion?
Well, I mean, from our point of view, we don't want it to get too near our annual meeting.
Oh,
And the
okay.
annual meeting is normally first or second weekend of July.
Okay, end of May.
So end of May or possibly the first weekend of June.
Now, I realize that you have to do the economics of this and to determine the price. But off the top of your head, what would be the price that you would charge for this?
Well, I think we need to drill down on the costings first. But I think we normally, for mystics and scientists, we normally charge something like £80 early bird and £95 for if you miss the early bird.
Yeah. So my guess at 95 was about right then.
Yeah, that's 95.
Yeah.
So it's a bit
95 euros.
It depends whether the speaker gets
€95.
any payment.
Pounds.
What happens in the mystics societies then? Do they get an honorarium?
Yes. So I mean,
yes, they do.
we'd basically need to put to be together. We need to put a budget together and then work out a break-even point. So that would be a bit of detail, but we're quite experienced doing that, and you probably are as well.
Yeah. Well,
And what helps a lot is the potential larger audience will give us a lot more leeway in terms of those kinds of costs.
yeah. And obviously, I can't predict that. I mean, my partner Rome asked me to predict how many registrants we would have, and I was just going off the wall. I mean, I didn't know. I guessed.
And I know we're in a rush, but can I just ask one more question? Say this meeting makes a huge profit. What will the financial arrangement be? Is the profit going to be split or something between the two organizations?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we normally do.
Yeah, I
What
think
normally
that
happens, is it? Yeah. Okay.
I think it depends on the shared scope, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the cleanest way to do is 50-50, and then you know what you're dealing with.
Yes. Yeah.
When I look through those items on the topic list, I would say the only two items that we may not share are the book and the documentary. And the reason I say the documentary is because that's a donation from another partner and to Contemplative Network. Those are the only two I can think of that would not be part of the share.
Which book do you mean, Bob? I'm a bit confused.
Well, that's my book that was using the titles of the chapters for the different talks. And so it would be a subset of the thing when we'd say, well, here's a link to a lower price or something. And we can always eliminate that if that bothers you. But that was the basis for the outline of the conference.
Yeah, okay. But it's not primary.
No, it's primary, it's secondary. It's secondary.
It's a secondary issue, yeah.
And the documentary, in a way, is secondary.
Okay, so 50% of sharing the profits and presumably sharing the losses, although it seems to me there's not much chance of having a loss if it's a Zoom meeting.
Well, I don't think that we're in a position to do that because we're a small nonprofit. So
there's no doubt that some conference like this would make a profit. I mean,
yeah. And obviously, if there is a loss, the share would not be 50-50. We would honor your part of it first. We wouldn't expect you to be paying us money, you know.
Well, I think I can't even envisage that.
We've never.
Yeah, like I say, I think we can be pretty confident of 150 to 200 people turning up for this. And so that would help. I mean, that pretty much guarantees that the costs will be covered. There's a few unknown variables like the cost of an administrator, but we'd be approaching it all with an eye on keeping things as efficient as possible. But the great thing with the online event is that there are very limited overheads. There's no cost in terms of all the location costs, which normally go into conferences, are just eliminated. No travel costs, no accommodation, venue hire, catering, all of that goes. So it makes things a lot simpler.
Well,
Can I
there are
just
two-
also? Oh, sorry, you go first, Bob.
No, go ahead. Well, there are two caveats to that. One, we have a lot more speakers than your normal, so there's a higher cost there. And the other is, I think that with all the options we've been looking at, webinar, live stream, all that, if we could, before the end of May, meet again with at least a cost analysis of a webinar only, I think that's worthwhile doing. We should do that at least.
Well, if you could tell me how much you've agreed to pay the speakers, then I can come up with a draft budget, because that's all part of what we expect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't pay speakers very much. We tend to pay them between 250 and 350 pounds. Occasionally, if we have someone very famous, we'll pay them a bit more. And there
would be an understanding, I think, with an online event. I don't know what the promise was for a physical talk, but I think there's an understanding that if you're showing up for a Zoom event or an online event, the honorarium will be a little bit lower than if you were showing up for a physical event.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I mean, you can tell us what you've agreed already, and we'll work from there.
Well, I'll share that with you, and I'm in the process of trying to negotiate lower rates for the conference, because that was a high cost. Right now, that stands at €80,000.
So what was that per person? I mean, what were you offering per person?
Well, originally it was a package that everybody got. Now I'm going back individually negotiating.
So what was the individual?
But how much was the speaker fee? That's what we need to know.
Well, yeah, the honorarium, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, right now I'm in the process of negotiating individual honorarium. So I'll give you the list as it is now.
Okay.
So you're still negotiating, but presumably it will be a different fee if it was an honorarium, if it was an online event.
That's correct. So because they would have to physically be there for 3 or 4 days.
Right. So
as far as the fee is concerned that you would charge, I'm depending on your experience as to what you would pay them. I look for you to do that.
We just wondered because you might have already promised them something, albeit for a different event. So we just.
Right. I don't think my numbers are relevant to what you're proposing. You've got to tell me how much you would pay. Because, see, we were covering flight costs, honorarium for sitting there for 3 or 4 days.
Yep.
That's a big deal. So I don't know that it's relevant for your webinar estimate.
Well, we would normally, I mean, we would pay between 250 and 500 pounds, and occasionally 750. That's our kind of ballpark figure.
Well, somebody, I can guide you on who's more negotiable and who's less. All I can do is that.
Yeah.
I can give some advice if you want to not give a package deal, do them individually. I can give you some advice on that, but I would let you do your first estimate based on your numbers.
Okay, well, we can do that.
David,
how do those amounts, Robert, those amounts in terms of honorariums, how do they sound to you in terms of first impression? Do they sound reasonable?
Oh, as far as I can tell, yes. Now they would be not just if we do it the same format. there would be a time when they're speaking, and then they choose to listen to the rest of them or not, but a time when there would be a panel discussion of all of them. So this is not a normal webinar where they speak and then goodbye. And I took that advice from David. He was wonderful, giving me how to do Q&A, then do a dialogue between the two speakers on each of the subsets, and then do a final panel discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I'm not sure whether I've got the full program. But this all needs to be revisited. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go in a minute because I've got another meeting fairly shortly, and I got something I need to do before it.
Quick, before you go, David, can I just ask you and Andrew, am I right in saying that you have the final say on this? It doesn't need board approval or anything like that, does it?
No, it's a capacity issue, and so we can decide whether we go ahead on this, but that's subject to finding, to having a proper administrative arrangement,
Of course,
which is costed into the budget.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Well, that's really been a great meeting anyway, a very productive meeting.
Yeah, I thought it went very well, and I'll try to document some of my thoughts back to you. And of course, it's being recorded, I hope. Yes,
yeah,
it's being
recorded
recorded
and summarized. Well, it's
and AI, so we're gonna have too much stuff. Okay.
All right.
Well,
Great.
thank you very much. It was very productive. Lyndon, I wish you would stop interrupting the meeting so many times.
All right. I'll cut back next time.
Yeah, good.
I'm sorry,
Right.
I never say, I'm sorry for being silent all the time. I'm just.
No, we had the right people here. We actually had the right people. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. That's great. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.